some of my criteria, some of my criteria, some of my criteria. So I believe this whole story. Yeah. Hey guys, this is Everyday Life, and today we're gonna do a podcast review on The Vanished, episode 142. And in this particular episode of The Vanished, it is about a woman named Jessica Earle. And Jessica Earle, she went missing on June 8th, 2018. She was 31 years old at the time, and she was last seen in Tallapoosa, Georgia. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to kind of summarize what happened in this podcast, and then I'm also going to talk about Sandra's efforts to work with the police to try to find her daughter. And then after I kind of summarize that up for you guys, we're going to talk about some of my criteria on what I think a good podcast in the true crime genre should have, and see how this podcast met those criteria. And we're going to give a judgment on that particular episode of the Vanished podcast. So here we go. So this story started out with Jessica wanting to buy her son an ATV for his birthday. You know, that's a great mother, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is how she went about trying to get this ATV. So about a month before Jessica went missing, she met a guy named Jeffrey Seth Odom, and she, I guess, became friends with this guy. From Sandra's point of view, she says they're more like acquaintances, but the way the information was presented to me, it seemed like they were more than friends. But her mom persists and says they both had boyfriends or girlfriends, and that they weren't more anything than acquaintances. But she met this guy and she started hanging out a lot with him. So Seth told Jessica, hey, I got a friend that has an ATV. You can give me the money and I'll handle the transaction. I'm like, no thank you. Why in the world would you do that? But apparently she trusts this guy enough to make the transaction so she can get her son this ATV. So of course, she gives Seth the money, and you know, after a few days of not hearing anything about the ATV, she's like, bro, where's my money? Like, where's the ATV? If you're not gonna get the ATV for me from your friend, like, you can give me my money back. But there's no ATV, and he didn't give her the money. So after those few days of, you know, not having the ATV, she and her friends end up tracking Seth down and finding him at a house in Little Circle Drive. She went there, talked to him for a little bit, trying to find out about the money, find out about the ATV. And she ended up staying the night over the house on Little Circle Drive with Seth. And my thing is, if you're just acquaintances with somebody, I don't think you're gonna be like just staying over somebody's house that you only known for like a month or something. That's just me. But I guess she trusts the guy enough still to stay overnight at the house. The next morning, Seth and Jessica have an argument over, they believe, money. It varies, but most of the witnesses say it was over money. They have a huge argument, and Jessica gets super upset and stuff, so she wants to leave. But here's the thing. So Seth tries to keep her at the house by hiding her keys. So when Seth hid her keys, Jessica's like, bro, I'm out. So she proceeded to leave on foot. Leaving on foot from a place, they said this was kind of like in a wooded area. Sort of. So I mean, I don't think leaving on foot would be the best idea, but she left on foot, and she called her friend and was like, hey bro, this dude's insane, I need a ride and all this stuff, and super upset about the ATV and everything. And then her friend was like, yeah, I understand, but I don't have a car, my husband's at work. When he gets home, we'll come pick you up. So they get off the phone, and Jessica proceeds to walk, and she calls her friend a few more times after that, but her friend doesn't answer, and that was the last they've seen of Jessica. Those are pretty much the events leading up to Jessica's disappearance. So a little bit about Sandra's efforts of trying to find Jessica. She went to the police, and initially the police was like, hey, we can't list Jessica as a missing person because she's an adult, and Sandra. She's like, bro, what the heck? So the case was kind of mishandled to begin with because of the resistance from the police to try to get this thing taken seriously. So once Sandra gave them a little bit more information about what was going on, they started to take the case a little bit more serious. She would try to get like outside parties to help search for her daughter, and the police department would decline that extra help. Sandra herself wanted to go look for her daughter, and the sheriff department was like, no, if you go look for your daughter, even with the permission of the people that own the property, we will arrest you. To me, that's like, why? Why can't she go look for her own daughter with the permission of people that own the property? Like, all she wants to do is to go find her daughter, and the police are being terrible and not letting her do so. So, kind of the theme of what was happening with Sandra and the police is that they just met her with a lot of resistance, really not making an effort to find the daughter and making more of an effort to find Sandra if she was out there trying to look for her daughter, which is terrible. So Seth, he ended up turning himself in because they said something about him getting bit by like a poisonous snake or something, but I listened to it a few times and I'm still kind of confused on how exactly him getting bit by a snake and him turning himself in like correlates. But he turns himself in, and he doesn't give them any information on Jessica's whereabouts. He's still currently in jail, but not for charges of anything to do with Jessica. So that was kind of a summary of the events leading up to Jessica's disappearance, and Sandra working with the police to try to find her daughter Jessica. So what makes a podcast in the true crime genre a good podcast? It needs to seem professional. So what I mean by that is that it needs to have good sound quality. It needs to have like, a cool little thing. It needs to have a cool little theme song to it. And it definitely needs a narrator that is like easy to listen to and makes you want to listen to more of it because their voice is relaxing. So did this podcast meet that criteria? Yes, it had really good audio with everyone, with Sandra's recordings and with the recordings of the main narrator, and also it had some pretty cool theme music. It was kind of spooky. It had like kind of spooky theme music and like mysterious, like, ooh, will I find this person or will we not find this person type of theme music. So it was nothing like irritating or annoying with any of it. It had really good audio quality. Another thing that a podcast in the true crime genre needs to have is a guest speaker that is relevant and has something interesting to say, and is going to have a strong point of view on what they're talking about. And in this podcast, Sandra was the one and only guest speaker. I think with the Vanished podcast, that's kind of how they are. They only have one person and one side of the story for most of their episodes. That is okay, but it would be cool to see other points of view about the story. But overall, Sandra, and with her being the guest speaker, she was really passionate about what she was saying, and what she was saying was very interesting. It didn't seem like she was necessarily bashing the police department for no reason. Like she had facts and she had examples of things of why she thought what she thought. So the next criteria a podcast in the true crime genre needs: the progression of how the events of the story is delivered needs to be told in a way that makes the listener want to keep listening to the podcast. They need to be interested, they need to be entertained and be like, holy crap, what's going to happen next? And with these true crime stories being like real life, if it's told in a really interesting way, it's like, holy crap, this is real and it's super interesting. A lot of the events are very tragic, but it's also very real and very interesting. So events need to be told in an order that is going to keep the listener entertained, interested, and wanting to know more about what happened. So I think this podcast did a good job with how it delivered its events to the listener. So that brings us to the judgment of this podcast review. I give this podcast an A+. It was a fantastic listen. It met the criteria of being a professional podcast, and the way the story was told kept me interested and entertained all the way to the end. The only thing that I would say about it is kind of wish that the Vanish podcast would get more sides of the story, more guest speakers when they do their stories, so you can, not just get a one-sided story, just one person's point of view of the whole thing. I mean, yes, it's okay. Yes, this podcast in particular came from the mother of the child that's missing. That is a pretty good person to have, but, it would have been nice to get some audio from, the friend, the husband, even Seth's mother, even though she may be in jail right now. I don't know. Just, it'd have been nice if you had some more points of view, some sides of the story. So, with this podcast, A+, judgment and overview, summary, and my criteria for this English project paper thing. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you guys not understand the contents of this video, you need to eat or go to bed. Peace.